I had always believed that love was enough to sustain a marriage. My wife and I had been together for years, building routines, sharing dreams, and navigating the ups and downs of life together. I thought our connection was strong, resilient, and unbreakable. I thought trust and mutual respect were constants I could rely on. I was wrong. It started subtly. There were small changes I barely noticed at first. A sigh here, a glance at her phone there, a subtle withdrawal in intimacy and conversation. I convinced myself it was just stress, fatigue, or the natural ebb and flow of long-term relationships. I told myself I was imagining things, that love didn't always need fireworks, and that patience would see us through. But beneath the calm, I felt a growing unease, an instinct that something fundamental was off. Then, one evening, everything came to the surface. We were sitting on the couch after dinner, the kind of quiet moment where I usually felt closeness. I tried to reach for her, to bridge the small distance that had been creeping between us. Instead of returning my gesture, she looked at me with an honesty I wasn't prepared for, and said something that pierced through every ounce of denial I had clung to. "I'm not attracted to you anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze, unsure if I had heard correctly. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal hidden within that simple sentence. This wasn't about a fight, a disagreement, or a fleeting emotion. This was a fundamental rejection, a confession that the person I had loved, trusted, and committed my life to no longer felt desire or connection toward me. The love I had assumed was mutual, the bond I had cherished, suddenly felt fragile, hollow, and incomplete. For a moment, I couldn't respond. There were no arguments left, no debates that could salvage what had been shattered. Her admission was absolute, leaving no room for denial, rationalization, or hope of reconciliation. I realized, with a clarity that was both painful and liberating, that staying would only prolong the inevitable heartbreak. That night, I made a decision. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I didn't beg for affection that wasn't there. I simply began to vanish. Not physically at first, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I withdrew from the routines that had defined our shared life, stopped investing energy into a connection she no longer valued, and started preparing for a departure that was both necessary and inevitable. In the following days, I maintained appearances. I showed up to dinners, I answered questions, I navigated social obligations, but the intimacy was gone, replaced by deliberate detachment. I focused on my work, my friends, and my own growth, creating distance that mirrored the emotional chasm she had opened. I refused to be manipulated by guilt, false affection, or the lingering hope that she might suddenly realize what she had lost. Her reaction was telling. At first, she seemed confused, even slightly concerned. She tried to rekindle conversations, to restore the closeness I had withdrawn, but I remained steadfast. I had learned that desire cannot be forced, that respect cannot be demanded, and that love without attraction is an uneven, unsustainable foundation. My withdrawal forced her to confront the consequences of her honesty in a way words never could. Weeks passed, and the distance became undeniable. Our home, once filled with laughter, warmth, and shared moments, became quiet, tense, and strained. I no longer sought her approval or affection. I no longer tried to bridge the gap. The space I had created was both a shield and a statement. I would not be diminished, manipulated, or devalued by her admission. Eventually, she began to realize the gravity of her words. The casual admission that had seemed so easy to speak now carried consequences she hadn't anticipated. I wasn't present in her life in the same way, and the absence was palpable. She couldn't force connection where there was none, couldn't manufacture desire or respect that had been eroded by her own confession. In the end, I walked away. I left the life that no longer held reciprocity, the home that had become a stage for unspoken resentment, and the relationship that had been hollowed by honesty used carelessly. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't cruelty, it was survival, self-respect, and clarity. I had loved, I had committed, and I had hoped, but hope cannot replace attraction, and devotion cannot mend disinterest. Months later, I look back on that period with a mix of sadness and relief. The pain of rejection was real, but it was necessary. It revealed truths I had ignored, taught lessons about self-worth, and forced me to step into a life defined by my own standards rather than the whims of someone else's desire. My departure was final, deliberate, and a reclaiming of dignity that had been eroded by her honesty delivered without consideration. What she learned, eventually, was the weight of attraction and connection in a marriage. You cannot simply admit disinterest and expect life to remain unchanged. The consequences are profound, immediate, and irreversible when the other person realizes they no longer need to seek validation from someone who has lost desire for them. In the end, love requires reciprocity. Respect requires presence, and attraction, the invisible thread that binds intimacy, cannot be faked or ignored without consequences. I vanished not out of malice, but out of necessity. Her honesty was a betrayal in its bluntness, and my response was a lesson in boundaries, self-respect, and the power of stepping away when the foundation of a relationship has been irreversibly compromised.